Having this discussion today with Deepa Bhaskaran Salem and Yamuna Harshavardhan about Deepa's new and first book, ADIDEVA, 25 Legends Behind His 25 Names, a yatra through Puranas, Sthala Puranas, and Itihasas. Deepa is a student of Hindu Dharma and Advaita Vedanta. She speaks and writes on Hindu Dharma, Itihasas, Puranas, Bhagavad Gita, parenting, and mental health in popular platforms and her own blog. She also conducts workshops for children and adults with insights drawn from Sanatana Dharma. Joining me for the discussion with Deepa will be Yamuna. Yamuna has lived and taught at Bengaluru, Kuala Lumpur, and Singapore before moving back home to Chennai, focusing on learning disorders management and child psychology. In 2021, she published a collection of stories from the Mahabharata titled Once Upon a Time, Thousands of Years Ago. Her second book, titled Vidya, Rerooting the Beautiful Tree, was published in 2022. Yamuna has been arranged with the Bharatiya Shikshan Mandal since 2019. She is now the state in charge of institutional projects. Today's session has been organized by Shruti Srinivasan. We are streaming live on YouTube and Twitter, and we have a select live audience with us. This book is very special, and I'm excited to talk about my own comments and thoughts about it. But we will start with Deepa presenting her book to us. I'm also delighted that today's session is Deepa's very first book talk. For the format of today's session, we will start with a presentation by Deepa. Then Yamuna and I will join her for an interactive conversation, and then we will take some questions from the live audience. I invite Deepa to present her book now.
Thank you, Aditi. Namaste to all. Om Namah Shivaya, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. It is indeed a special day for me, and all pranams are first to Mahadeva, who himself makes his stories to be told. Through many, many kalpas, through many, many voices, some very great voices, as well as some small voices like mine. I also want to offer my thanks to Rajiv Vermaji and Shruti Srinivasan for organizing this opportunity to talk about my passion with such a wonderful, two ladies that I really respect, who are not only authors, but I know from a long experience with them that they are also very, very serious sadhakas. So it's really a very, very apt for me to discuss this book with these two wonderful ladies. Finally, I also thank all of you who have dialed in from many platforms. Sri Rudram says that even the audience is Shiva listening. So Namas Sabhabhya Sabhapatabhya. As you all know, as Aditi mentioned, this is my first book, Adideva, 25 Legends Behind His 25 Names. She showed it, and here is the book again. It has been published by Blue One Ink, which is very, very appropriate, I feel. They've been doing some excellent work with publication of fantastic Indic voices in the recent times, and interestingly, many on Shiva also. It's happening at the right time. Like many of you, many of us growing up in India, in the Hindu Dharma, I was drawn to our almost infinite corpus of stories since childhood. And that's how we learn, learn at our lap of our grandmother or our parents. And like many, I realized that our legends, whether from our Itihasa or Puranas, are multi-layered. It's not like you read them once and you're done, because the layers just unravel themselves as the years go by. And each layer is not only beautiful, but is insightful in their own way, but it also has a specific purpose at different times in our development. As childhood, they are, of course, fantastic, entertaining, fascinating stories. Children grow up, Amar Chitrakathas, and, talking about them, enacting them. And as we enter our teens, we kind of also start thinking about them. They provoke us to think. They provoke us even to question and doubt, why is this happening? That doesn't seem right. But they actually activate our thinking and our logic. And we start applying our notion of dharma in that context and trying to unravel it as we grow into our youth. And as we grow up into our adulthood, we see the teachings of dharma, the dharma sankatas, and how do people, Mahatmas, react at different times? How do our devatas protect the world? what is creation. So we start looking at some of the teachings of dharma through the Puranas. And what later on happens is, as we embark on serious sadhana, we actually see the learnings from the Gita or the Upanishads reflected in those stories. So you actually, it's like aha moments when you read a story. I'm like, wow, that's exactly what the Gita says. So we start making those connections, and it makes us more and more, insightful and inspired when we go through the Puranas. For me, personally, I found that, as an Advaita Vedanta student, the stories have become a source of dhyanam. So, as you all know, Advaita Vedanta does talk about Nirguna Brahman, but all the Advaita gurus, they emphasize the role of Saguna Upasana as a critical to the journey, as you develop the adhikara, as you develop the sadhana chatushtayam, as they say in Advaita Vedanta, the capacity to have the shraddha, capacity to focus your mind, to avoid negativities, to control temptations. All of that happens, is very critical for an Advaita Vedanta student as well. So Saguna Upasana is prescribed as a consummate, complete method for achieving almost all of the adhikaras for Vedanta. Right from purification of the mind, focusing of the mind, expansion of the mind towards all of Bhagwan's creation, mindfulness, reduction of desires, and so on. In a way, it's like a proverbial silver bullet for the mind. But I also realized that it cannot just stop at visiting temples and chanting stotrams and asking for or seeking Bhagwan's help, which is all very, very important. Doing puja, very, very important. However, our mind still falls into pride and jealousy and greed and craving, we needless anger towards others. All of that means only two things, right? One is we have not understood the nature of Bhagwan as the father and mother of the universe, as helping us through, guide, is a guru also guiding us through our journey. But also that same Bhagavan is our own Antaryaman, and the Antaryaman in everybody else. Or it can mean that we don't understand that nature of Ishvara, who's all pervading, all pervasive, omnipotent. Everything that's happening is because of that Bhagavan. Or we just do lip service to it. We talk about it, but we have not truly internalized that understanding. So how do we internalize that understanding, beyond doing all the puja vidhis and, yatras and stotram? How do we internalize that? Make Bhagwan, rag rag me, as they say, khan khan me. How do we do that? Internalize the devata and make the devata like feel that antaryaman all the time, being us more mindful, more courageous, more happy, more kind, and so on. And that what Mahatmas say is by dhyanam, right? So it's actually by dhyanam of that Bhagwan. However, there is a problem. Dhyanam is not easy. Forget about nirguna dhyanam. Even saguna dhyanam, we are trying to focus on mind on Shiva or our Ishta Devata, but our mind is going in 20 different directions because we are externally focused and we struggle to retain our mind, right? Like Arjuna asks in the Gita. Now, what our acharyas and in Bhagwan Adi Shankaracharya also says in the Shivananda Alari and many others say, is that Saguna, the stories themselves are a powerful a tool for dhyanam, for meditation. And, I got this insight from Swami Tejamayanandaji in one of his lectures. He said of Chinmay Mission. He said that, if it's okay if you're not able to do Nirguna Dhyanam, it's totally okay. Go to Saguna Dhyanam. Maybe to do a nama japa of that of the devata. If that's not possible, think of the form of the Lord. Like the Pada Adikesha, how beautiful Bhagwan is, how beautiful are his eyes and lips and feet and everything. Even if that is difficult, he recommended that just focus on the stories. There are countless stories that you can focus on and make that an object of meditation, and that itself will help us develop love to that Bhagwan and really understand the nature of that Bhagavan and slowly progressed in our dhyanam. So this advice was hovering in my mind when I was also reading the Shivananda Lahari of Adi Shankaracharya, where he also has this second verse itself. It's like a beautiful, powerful verse. It goes like this: Galanti Shambho Charita Sarita Kil Bisharajo Dhalanti Dhikulyat Saranishu Patanti Vijayatam दिशन्ति संसारभ्रमणपरितापोपशमनम् वसन्ति मच्छेदो हृदभुवि शिवानन्दलहरी. In a nutshell, it's a very beautiful and it's very poetic as well. But in a nutshell, what he says is, Shambho, let your stories, the river of your stories, let that come and purify mine, remove all the impurities in my mind. Let it just fill in all the cavities and crevices of my heart. And when the problems of the samsara hit me, the samsara paritapopashamana, so when they hit me, let it cool my mind. So I'm not reacting to it. I'm not like getting agitated by them, but I'm actually, you're cooling it. And then finally, let it just, reside in my heart as waves of Shivananda. So you're always, so the point is that it helps focus, it helps remove impurities, and it helps face the onslaught of the problems that samsara gives us. And finally, it resides in our heart as a permanent wave of bliss. So that itself shows that all our Mahatmas believe in the power of stories. And no wonder we have in Bharat, we have this excellent tradition of Katha, whether it's Ramayana or Bhagavat or Shiva Purana, or whatever it is, Kathas are a very, very important part of it. So with that in mind, I started reading a lot of the Puranas, not just the traditional stories that we have heard, but really going into the originals, in English, translations in English, a little bit of Sanskrit that I know, as well as in Tamil, which is my mother tongue. Then I started writing them, and I started sharing on Facebook, and there was a lot of reception. Now, the thing is, we think we know many of these stories, but now as more and more of our experts, including Aditi and Yamuna, they've published these things where we are able to really get down to the original sources and see what they tell us. And that's actually a very powerful. So that's what I did. And that journey eventually took me to many requests to publish them as a book. I created an ebook, and then finally it has turned out in this book form, for which I'm very, very thankful. Now, why these 25 names? The obviously are countless, and I myself have probably another 15 or 20 more. I just chose those stories for two reasons. One is, of course, they have a lot of drama. They have a lot of, interesting plot twists and characterizations and so on. But they also showcase a specific teaching in Dharma or Adhyatma. There is something special about them that our ancestors have immortalized in the form of either a stotra or a kriti, like a song, bhajan, or a shilpa, in our temples or something like that. So that is why I picked this 25, just to give it some kind of a structure. And the stories in the books can be organized into kind of three categories. The first are very, very common legends. All of us grew up, learning them, knowing them. But I myself, I thought I was pretty well read with respect to that, but I also missed a lot of the key teachings that they intend to pass on to us. And we'll talk about that later. But just like in, like Mahabharata and Ramayana, there are sections of a lot of discussions around Dharma, a lot of discussions around Adhyatma that I never knew was a part of those stories. So the original Shiva Purana or the Skanda Purana, they tell us those kind of teachings, which I thought was important. So that was common legends, but I didn't really know all of the teaching that came out from it. The second were well-known legends. We all know them, but often in the popular retelling, they miss a lot of the key details, or sometimes common retelling even deviate from the Puranas. So that is the second category. And the third categories are some tales which are not at all well-known or known only in specific regions. That's what I'm hearing also from some of the early reviews of the book is, I knew some of these stories, but I don't even know some of these names, because there are some regional stories that are popular in a regional way, but not across India. So that was the reason for the thing. And in a nutshell, anyway, what this whole journey has taught me is this like mind-boggling discovery. We all know the stories, but I don't think I realized the magnitude of not just the quantity of stories, but even the depth, the plots, the teachings, and it was just mind-boggling. And even this, the Shiva Purana, for example, we don't even have the whole text. The Shiva Purana itself says that there are 12 samhitas, but only 7 are known. So how much are lost? But even what we have is very, very interesting. But I'm also fascinated by the fact that these stories are spread across Bharat. They are, a story that was supposed to happen in, say, like Gujarat, is being depicted in a temple in the south, in Karnataka or Tamil Nadu. how did these stories land in puja vidhis? I discovered as I did puja, the Ashtotram of Shiva, they're connecting to the stories, which I didn't know when I first started doing the puja. How did they land up? How did they land in the stotras and the songs? And, even till today, we have the whole grandeur of Mahadeva, the magnitude of Mahadeva celebrated across Bharat. So all of this I feel is just magic, and it's his own magic. So I would, he's our hero, subject matter, protagonist. He's also our goal, and he's also our guru in every way. So he's Adideva. That's kind of my little, a lot of people actually come and tell me, even now when I publicize the book, they say, like, I'm kind of perplexed about Shiva. I don't really understand Shiva. So it's very understandable, only because Shiva is full of contradictions. He's full of, like, it's very hard to say, kind of put a finger and say this is what Shiva is, because he spans across all the emotions and personalities. So that's what I express in my introduction. So I will just read just one paragraph from my introduction, and then I'd love to talk to Aditi and Yamuna. So here's my introduction about Shiva himself. Who is Shiva? Can one even define him? He is the formless who manifests in myriad forms that defy imagination. Each form is in contrast to another. He represents the contradictions of stillness and energy, austerity and passion, anger and compassion. He straddles all because he is beyond all. He is, at the same time, the celibate destroyer of karma, but he's also the romantic Kameshwara. He's the primitive hunter Kirata, and he's also the evolved Dakshinamurti. He is the dweller of the macabre symmetry, the Shmashana, but he is also the dweller of the mesmerizing Kailasha. He's the wrathful Veerabhadra, but he is also the benevolent Sadashiva, Bholenath. He's the terrifying Kapalin, and he's the captivating Sundareshwara. He's the lord of the Bhutas and Pretas, but he's also the consort of the most beautiful Uma. He's the eternally still Linga, but he's also the dynamic Nataraja. So how do you even grasp a concept like that? So it's a journey of a lifetime. I feel it's probably a journey of multiple lifetimes, but immersion in these stories and the stories of his bhaktas can set us off in that direction. And I hope that the book has really inspired me. I know from the last few years, but I hope and pray to him that the book will inspire people to not just know the Mahadeva Tattva, but to use these stories as a tool for their own dhyanam and develop more Shiva Bhakti through it. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to discussing the book with you, Aditi. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Deepa. I just wanted to start by showing again the book. I want to show one of the pages inside, because one of the things I really appreciate about what Deepa has done with this book is, as you can see, it has quotes from the Shastras, that it has it in the Sanskrit original in Roman, then the translation. And for each story, it has the source or sources, and also has the illustrations. And so what's really nice about this is Deepa's writing itself is very clear, accessible, it's very easy to read, but it's also very scholarly, and everything is backed up with the Shastras, and she's done meticulous research, as she herself is a Shiva Bhakta for a long time and a sadhaka. And so when you read the book, I feel like you learn a lot from the Shastras, the different Puranas. There are so many Puranas. Some of us may be familiar with some of them, but not all of them. And you get an appreciation for the Sanskrit literature. And then you also learn about different temples and things like that. So there's a lot that you learn, but it's in a format that's very enjoyable and accessible through storytelling, which is really what the Puranas were all about, which is bringing us the devas and teachings about dharma through stories, through something all of us can grasp and remember. So Deepa, just to start with, is there a particular story among these 25 that was the most meaningful to you or special to you that you'd like to talk about?
I was expecting this question, and it's a very hard choice. But I will start out with something that I had no clue before I started writing this. It's one of the Dwadasha Jyotirlingas, of course. It's the temple of It's called Grishneshwara today. I don't recall the name of the chapter. I think it is towards the end, 21, sorry, Grishneshwara. So the what is fascinating is it's shocking, right? Because the story is it's a temple in Maharashtra of today, and it's called Grishneshwara, but in the original it's mentioned as Gushma. So in the Koti Rudra Samhita, it's referred to as Gushmeshwara. Nevertheless, it's a story that is reflecting the second chapter of the Gita like nothing else, right? So the story goes that there is a very great Shiva Bhakta, and he has a wife. Her name, I believe, is Sudeha. His name is Sudharma. He has a Sudeha. They're a very happy couple, but Sudeha is very upset that she's not able to have a child. And this desire, which is normal, but she just takes it to one level. She's obsessing over this desire, and she forces her husband to marry her own sister, who is Gushma. Interestingly, her husband keeps warning her, just like we say in the Gita, there is no, just let's accept our prarabdha. Bhagavan wills what happens to us, and we are Shiva Bhaktas, so we have to accept what is given to us. But she refuses because that desire has taken hold of her. And then she forces her own sister to conceive, and as her husband warns her again, now not only are you going to deal with your desire, but now you're going to deal with jealousy, because now you have your sister will conceive. But she refuses to listen to reason. So now she gets her sister married to her own husband, and there is a child that's born. And right from the when the child is placed on her own lap, she's burning with jealousy towards her own sister, because sister has what she doesn't have. And the story goes on how her jealousy develops to a point where she one day kills that child. So it just goes to that level. So that whole story of Sudeha is the very, very famous ladder of fall shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, which is the dhyayate vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu upajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kama krodho bijayate क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृति विभ्रमः स्मृति भ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशः बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यति. Right? So it starts out, everything starts out as a small interest in something, but then we feed it, so it becomes a very strong attachment. Then when we are not, and then it becomes a burning desire. And when that desire is not fulfilled, you become angry. And then that anger becomes, a burning anger where you actually lose, you get deluded. You like, what are you supposed, then you, smriti vibrama, you forget what is right and what is wrong, because that has consumed you to the point where then your buddhi nashat pranash, you lose your sense of discrimination and you end up, in trouble. So that is the journey of Sudeha. On the other hand, the same story shows the story of Gushma, who's the younger sister, who's also from the same very Shiva Bhakta family, but she is such a Sthita Prajna. So the entire, you see that last part of the second chapter, she lives it. When she's married, she accepts it. And she has this tradition. She makes out of her own hand, she makes 100 Shivalingas with sand every day. She does puja, and then she immerses all of them in a tank, in a pond. So she does that, but more than that, she accepts what's given to her. When the child is born to her, she's happy. She offers to the sister, saying he's your child too. She's very giving and all of that. But later, when that same son is killed by her own sister, she doesn't even shed a tear. She is like, Bhagavan has put this child for this. He is the one who he plants us. And that's actually the word from the Shiva Purana. She says, Bhagavan plants us in this earth for a certain reason. And when that reason is over, Bhagavan himself removes us from this janma. So I am totally okay. And again, when her sister, if she knows her sister, she doesn't even ask her sister why she did it. And finally, the story goes that when she goes to immerse her Shivalingas the next morning, the sun rises from he comes back. So Shiva is, and again, she's not mad. It's like, okay, Shiva wants the sun to come back, I'll take him. So it's a very, she's Sthita Prajna, the whole Gita was, Dukhesh Anudvignamanaha, Sukheshu Vigatasprihaha, Vitaraga Bhaya Krodaha, Sthitadhir Muni Ruchite, right? They are neither upset when something wrong happens to them, nor they get elated when they get something. They're beyond likes and dislikes. They're beyond anger and fear, right? So you see this contrast in these stories. And apparently, when Shiva says, she rises from the lake and he says, I will punish your sister for doing this to my bhakta. And she says, no, don't do that. Instead, manifest here as a Jyotirlingam and bless everybody. So that is the tale of the Gushmeshwara in the Purana, but today in modern parlance, it's called Grishneshwara thing. I had no clue about this story before I started out. So I would rank this as probably my most favorite story out of the lot. I know it's very rare, but I would start with that.
That's fascinating. I also was not aware of that story earlier. And I think it illustrates very well that a lot of times we think of Puranas or Sthala Puranas as being kind of like these like mythology or just these fantastical tales and like superstitious and primitive. And then there's this kind of Western bias we have that, oh, like philosophy and Advaita Vedanta, it's something separate, but they're actually very much
Yeah.
intertwined. If you read the Puranas and imbibe the ethos and worldview behind it, you get all of the lessons and messages and values of Vedanta and Dharma. It just comes in a different format.
Yeah, and much more digestible format in a way, right? For everybody. Yeah.
So Deepa, can you share with us a little bit about this journey of writing your first book and what were some lessons or surprises along the way? I'm sure there are many in the audience who'd be curious what the publishing process is like, and what it was like for you. So if you could share some thoughts, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you are much more seasoned than me, and I think you've been an inspiration as well. Frankly, I don't think there was, at least for this book, I have been working on a couple of other books, to be honest, more targeted towards parenting, for example, that's actually in the works. I also wanted to write more about Lalita, Tripura Sundari, because that's something that I'm not saying the people in other states aren't aware, but it seems much more prevalent in, Tamil, Telugu, we learn about the Lalitopakhyanā, the Bandasura. So when I'm as part of my satsang group and, we talked about it and people said, no, I'm not aware of it. So I was actually thinking of doing more around, Lalita Tripura Sundari, and then this parenting, and then I had some humor books, like kind of Vedantic humor kind of things that I was planning. But I just, as I was writing them, and I did have some children's projects, I published an activity book for children. But in the middle of it, I just felt like, if I'm going to do any publication of any sort, it has to start with Shiva. I can't do this. I can't publish anything else before I put out something about Mahadeva. That was kind of my, I really had to deliberately put aside those things to finish this. But as far as the writing process itself, Aditi, I think I have not trained or anything. I mean, I'm just, I'm in a profession that involves, I'm in a marketing profession, so it involves a lot of writing. So I'm used to like more of technical and business writing. But I'm a very voracious, reader. So I kind of picked up from that. But one of the things I feel I could have done better is just give yourself a timeline. I did not do that. I spent about 4 years on this, so which probably was, now on retrospect, I would have said, okay, I'm going to give myself a deadline and finish it. And for the next book, I hope I'll do that. But the more important thing is, I think it's also a question of identifying the tone. It was okay to publish these posts on Facebook, friends, they like it. And it's okay if there are like, here and there, because usually it's done on the spur of the moment. We don't spend a lot of time proofing it or editing it. So that was fine. But when I started thinking of it as a book, I had to think of the tone. Should I make it very scholarly, as we just talked about? Should I make it more scholarly and, a lot of citations, or how much liberties can I take in, like, using the narrative? Because I'm not a scholar. I don't want to be a scholar. I'm not a scholar. So I wanted to really get people inspired about the story itself. And like I said, use it as a means for dhyanam. So I said, let me stay true to what I feel and not change my tone to accommodate what is maybe considered scholarly or considered more marketable or things. So I said, I'm going to stick to my way of doing it. I just enjoy these stories. I close my eyes and visualize every story. Like, for example, Tripurantaka or, Rameshwara, I just visualize that story. And I just think of how would I say this to in my children? And that's how I wrote it. The other thing which I grappled with was I wanted those learnings to come out in some form. That each story has some message, whether on dharma or adhyatma, even for example, the Uma Maheshwara thing, Parvati argues with Shiva, Ishkod Sankhya. How do you bring them out without sounding very boring and, like scholarly? So there are a couple of times where I took some liberties of going back in chronology and, kind of finding a way to make that teaching pop out in a way without, because it's very easy to lose it if you just tell the story, and I didn't want to do that. So other than that, I think, it is just a question of going through a few edits and putting it together. I'm sure now when I read it, I submitted the manuscript like mid last year. So now I feel like there are many things I could have done better, but I'm sure that's a very continuous, process for every writer.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually I get a dread if I have to I get dread if I have to read the pages of a book already written because oh, I could have written this so much differently.
Yeah,
Because the
yeah,
writing process is so long and you change as a writer even as you're writing the book and then after the post drafting piece of it. But I think it's very interesting what you said about the tone because that I think is a struggle for all Indic writers, especially writing in English. And sometimes it's, you don't want to be too scholarly and maybe like not reach the mainstream audience, but you also don't, as people who are astikas, we also don't want to be so uh creative that you end up taking liberties or distort. And I think you've actually achieved that very well because sometimes when I read a book, I wonder, is this in the Shastras or is this from the author's imagination? From yours, this is very clear. It's all from the Shastras,
yeah.
and you're just distilling it and communicating and conveying it in a way that's very easy to understand and accessible, so that rasa is there, and then one feels the devotion to Shiva and this connection with Shiva. So I think that's very hard to achieve, but you've definitely achieved that. So I'm going to ask one more question before inviting Yamuna to join, which is if there's one message you'd want a reader to take away from your book, what would you like that message to be?
Um, I mean, personally, I think I'm just fascinated around this whole Purana parampara, right? How is this? Like, we are obviously a very ancient civilization. There are scholars who actually are proving that every day to us. But it's still fascinating that these stories have landed where they have, in this form. And I wonder, and I know there are many people have talked about it, Professor Balagangadhara, several people have talked about this Purana tradition. I mean, I think our land was full of sutas. The Suta Parampara. Some of the famous ones, Roma Harshana and, Ugra. We have a couple of them who are Vyasa students and all of that, but I don't think they were the first ones. I think the Suta Parampara has been around forever. And these were people in those days, not just charioteers. I know that there's a modern concept them as charioteers. They were probably very good in navigating through those days of, no roads and no GPS and no Google Maps. Definitely, they probably went around many, many, many lands, and they were story collectors in a way. They collected stories from across the board, and then those stories have somehow spread across India. And to the point where, of course, at some point, Vyasa Maharshi has compiled them into the Puranas, definitely in some form of fashion. And I'm sure there have been multiple, like even for the Shiva Purana, for example, there is a notion that there was a separate Vayu Purana and some of the Vayu Purana was absorbed in the Shiva Purana. There's a whole lot of scholarship around that. But nevertheless, that entire, whole corpus of stories across Akhanda Bharat and probably even beyond have been not just brought in by the suttas, but transmitted, discussed. These Vedanta topics or Adhyatma topics have been discussed as part of the Puranas, and they've become, I don't know how to say, they've been infused into the very soil of India. To the point where every temple, everybody knows, right? Like no matter where, even for example, this Bhikshat and actually I believe that's the story, that's the picture that you showed. It's apparently happened in Gujarat, that story according to the Purana, but everybody knows, Bhikshatana, Tripurantaka, everybody knows Tripurantaka. How did that happen? It's just a fascinating thing. So I feel one message I would request, is take the time to learn these stories across. See, unfortunately, many of these Thala Puranas are more focused on in the south and a little bit in Maharashtra and a little bit Gujarat. The mainland, obviously we have seen, Sitaram Goel says 4,500 temples. God only knows how many temples have been, or I'm sure many of them would have had some Sthala Puranas associated with them, some story that was connected with that particular temple, but we have lost them. But I think thankfully the memories are still there. Thankfully the Purana is still there. So I think we should, just like we are doing, taking more effort these days for Ramayana, Mahabharata. Definitely, there's a lot more scholarship, a lot more people going back to the original sources. I think we should take the same effort for many of our, at least all the Mahapuranas, if not others, to take the effort to go back to the originals, have more books on the topic. You are writing, and many of them, many new people. Of course, Vivek Devroyji is doing an excellent work in bringing them out. So I would suggest use the material available to really read the Puranas, connect them to Adhyatma, connect them to your whatever sadhana you're doing, puja or japa, whatever, connect them to it. And definitely tell them to your children. Definitely, please make that a living relative. A lot of people ask me, are they real? I'm like, what do you mean, are they real? Then one question which I came up in a workshop is this child asked, is this real? And I asked her, I'm giving you two choices. You tell me which is real. I'm telling you about an earthquake that happened in Fiji in 1820, where, somebody saved 20 people and, something happened, they ran out of food, whatever. I'm giving you something. And then I'm telling you about the story of Rama, which is more real to you. Tell me which is more real to you. That's what matters, right? So it's all our choice. And I'm not saying, we should not do historical analysis and all of that. But I think, I hope each of us, whoever's listening or reading the book, is really takes the time to, go to the Puranas, read them, and make them as popular as Ramayana, Mahabharata, because really it's the same story. Like we just talked about, the Gita is reflected in there, Sankhya, so many conversations are in there as well. So I would, that is what I would wrap up with.
Wonderful. Yamina, please join us and share your questions and thoughts.
Yeah, thanks so much. Namaskaram, everybody. This is a dream panel for me to be on. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me be part of this. I feel so honored. I feel so blessed, more than honored, to be here. And Deepa, so far it has been amazing the way you have expressed what the book is about, the essence of Shiva worship, and the way you have brought out the entire book is amazing. Unfortunately, I don't have the copyright with me here. I live away from Chennai now. I'm just visiting the city. And exactly what I experienced from that book was the previous question that Aditi asked about, uh, to which you responded, was about the tone in which to write, right? When I read it, uh, I couldn't sense a tone. It was like an experience. It was like sharing an anubhava, right? It was so free flowing. It was more of uh, something just hits when you read a book, right? It's something like that happened. It was amazing, and I must commend you for um, doing such a wonderful job on such a difficult topic. That must be highlighted. I have written a book on Mahabharata. I don't say that's difficult at all, because the story is already there, and it's got a chronology, right? It's very easy to present or retell stories from the Itihasas, whereas to bring Puranic stories, a difficult Purana such as Shiva Purana, of the most difficult subject, like Shiva himself, is amazing. You've done a phenomenal job. I must commend you for that. Mm, and as I was reading, I realized I was smiling, and there was nobody around me to see me smile. So was Kanda. The way he interacts with, Murugan interacts with his father. I was smiling. It was so lovely to read it. Okay. And you must keep doing this with our Puranas. As you say, Puranas are yet to find their ground and the reception they ought to get with our people. And again, the previous point you mentioned about temples. So temples and the Sthala Puranas are entirely intertwined. Temples devoid of Sthala Puranas somehow feels like a shell. the vibration of the temple is present only when you enter there with knowing the Sthala Purana and relating to that. That is the way we relate to Bhagavan over there, right? It's Shiva himself. It's, as you say, he is a contradiction. He is there in so many forms, so many contradictory forms, and he is the Nada Moola. He gave the source of sound. He is silence himself, right? He Anadi Anand. So these things, especially when temple goers go to temple, like you say, we go to whatever, we tell a few shlokams, see the arti, and then take the prasadam and come out. That becomes a chore. But this work that you're doing is so amazing, and especially to the English speaking population, who tend to be a little careless about our culture and heritage. This is amazing. I must commend you on that. So I just also want to ask, okay, in the introduction it was told that I come from this background of education, and you also told as children, we tend to look at them as stories, where it has a certain form, and it's just meant to be enjoyed. It's an entertainment, and then you start unraveling the layers under them as you grow up, as you age and as you mature, as you meditate on them. And also, I must at this point again go back to the stone part. Your meditative nature is what brought out that what you sense as the tone in the book. It's totally meditative. Reading your book, it is so meditative, and I must highlight that also here. Coming back to what I want you to share with us now, when we go to children, and as you say, there are children who ask, "Is this real?" It's a very common question. Even older people keep asking that, current ages. Shraddha is something that has to be cultivated to be experienced. You don't start with the experience, you need to cultivate it. So, in that sense, I would want from you, the value of our Puranic stories as a source of educative medium, as a pedagogy in education. Can you please? I know this is kind of going a little overstepping the limit of our conversation, but I really want that to be highlighted, because my intent is to bring all this into what they call mainstream. So I really want from you, as the author, as an experiencer, to highlight it.
Yeah, this is a very important topic because I think, as you rightly said, the English education has really removed the not just the Shraddha for the Adhyatma. I'm not even talking about that. We are even not able to appreciate the aesthetics of the stories and the Puranas, right? So I think it has to. I mean, unfortunately, we have to rely on home environment to develop that these days. But I think in an ideal world, I would say these Puranas would be part of the education curriculum as the children grow. I mean, we all grew up with Amar Chitrakatha first, and then that is where the seed of that interest was born. But the problem is, even with my own children, I see, yes, they know all these stories. I mean, not this level, but they know quite a bit of them. But the problem is, once they go into the teenage, they feel, okay, I know the stories, I move on because they have other priorities to go to. How do we bring that back into the education system, at least in Bharat, where you kind of start tackling these, like, what does the story mean? Is this right? It's okay to have those discussions. And in at least in the US, the children have this concept of a Socratic seminar. So they'll take some kind of a book that they will read, and they will analyze. Every child will bring their viewpoint, and they'll analyze, and sitting around a table. There are many ways where we can make Puranas part of the as they're growing up. I don't. They can be part of the literature class, if they are able to do that. But they can also be part of a moral instruction class, I guess, poetry class, logic. I mean, so many things come out when you start reading the Puranas. Somebody like you can use and I know some people are doing that already, using stories to demonstrate a certain value. or a certain logic or something like that. So I think, yeah, I don't have a clear answer to it, but at home, I'm trying, like making Purana Itihasa reading should be like a mandatory every night. It's something that because any other fiction book, which is all fine, they all love reading it. They are actually can cause some disturbance when you're late in the night. So at least late in the night before you go to bed, you read something from the Itihasa Purana and go to bed, right? So it's actually a nice way to end the day. And you get some peace of mind, you develop some love for God. There are benefits to that. But what we are missing as a community is the ability to look at the aesthetics of the Puranas, to look at the logic, the teachings, all of that. And also it's, as Sanjay Samnyal and other people say, it's part of our sacred geography. It's how can you, like you said, how can you go to a temple? And by the way, when I grew up, even people wouldn't know that, like, for example, Srirangam Sthala Purana, right? They would not know about Srirangam. Like I had to tell them, did you know, Vibhishana was given this Ranganatha. Many people don't know this. So how do we make, at least at a local level, forget about something that's far away, at least at a local level, can we know about our local temples? What is the Purana? What is the Sthala Purana? How does it relate to any of the Mahapuranas? So this education, home, some people do, some people don't. How do we make it as part of the system? And I'm hoping that people like you can drive that change within our education system. I don't have a clear answer to that.
I have the content from you, so let me see how well we can try and take this forward. And there is something that I keep experiencing whenever I read our Itihasas, Puranas. It shows something about ourselves more than anything else, right? It's kind of psychologically, or I don't know, call the self, whatever you call the self, it's quite illuminating. What we see as Shiva and Shakti, we can experience as part of ourselves when we read these and when we think about these. So that is the process by which, as you said, when we're children, it means something to us, and as we grow up, it means something different, and we keep, growing into it. So taking these, I know you've thrown the ball into my court again. So and let me see, we have to actually do that and keep giving us content. We will be taking more of this forward. And also, this choice of name, Adideva. Adideva. So of all Shiva's names, so was there a reason why you chose this particular name for the book?
You may recognize this because it's the first word of a very, very sweet bhajan composed by Swami Tejamanandaji. That is really because this Adideva Mahadeva He Dayanidhe. That's one of my favorite bhajans, and having Guruji having sung it, Swami Tejamanandaji has sung it. So it has always been a special, it's part of my every Monday routine. And now Kaushiki Chakraborty has sung that as well. So it just resonated with me. I could have called it just Shiva or Mahadeva, but I was looking for something that's unique. And I thought, what better than a name that resonates with me? I do truly believe that, I think it's more my personal connection, I would say, than anything that's. And then it so happened that the illustrator has picked this thing which looks like Adi Yogi. So there is some, it's his plan, I guess. I didn't choose that illustration, but I think there are things beyond our decisions, and I kind of respect that. I didn't want to fight against that. So yeah.
It's a beautiful title, I would say. It being your first book, and also him being the first of all gods. Anandi Anant Adiyogi is beautiful. I just wanted to know why you had chosen it, nevertheless. And also, how, I mean, as a researcher, I would want to ask you, you have cited several references for each of the stories that you've written, multiple, right? And you also said, you in some places where there were probable contradiction, not exactly contradictions, there's some kind of a mismatch. You went with the one that was more well known or more prevalent among the different Puranas. So, I'm curious to know, what is, I mean, did you find out these references? It's so scattered. I see that you have looked at so many sources. And it's not like, Google Guru, where you go and find out all these things. It's crap. So how can you just illuminate on, people? It might help people who would want to do this type of research. It's quite tedious.
Yeah, yeah. So I would
So,
say, Shiva
yeah.
Purana was my main, Shiva Purana, and in some cases Mahabharata, where, some of the stories, they were my main sources. And for that, I had books from Motilal Banarsidas, the translation. And I also had, the Bibeko Debroy has published, but unfortunately not when, I think it was published early last year or something. It was too late for me. So I relied mostly on the Sanskrit translation, Sanskrit English translation by Motilal Banarsidas. For I did have to rely on Wisdom Lib for some of the other references. So, a handful of stories, they were also in Skanda Purana, and I didn't have a proper book. I have, of course, Kanchi Paramacharya has talked extensively about Skanda Purana and many of his talks. So I was familiar with it, but just for reference, I had to go to that. See, the thing is, I did, where Aditi had asked about the writing process. Initially, I thought, should I kind of delineate, okay, this is from Shiva Purana, but in the Mahabharata, then I thought it doesn't flow. I don't want to make it like scholarly. So I didn't want to say this part is from Shiva Purana, and this is from Linga Purana, and this is from Mahabharata. I thought it kind of interrupted the flow. So I just cited it at the end. I would say in most cases it was Shiva Purana, which was the main reference. And then Sthala Puranas. So again, the decision around Sthala Puranas, there are some stories which the Shiva Purana just briefly mentions, but it doesn't go into the stories. But the Sthala Puranas are expanding them. So, I think there have been a time where maybe the Sthala Puranas were also part of some Purana, but they may have been missed out. We don't know that. Even like I said earlier, Shiva Purana itself claims it has 12 Samhitas, but we only have 7. Skanda Purana also, even Kanchi Paramacharya, so many are still missing. So some of the links between the Sthala Puranas and the Mahapuranas may have been there, but maybe they have been kind of, lost over time. One example I found is this Gokarna Kshetram, right, in Mahabaleshwara. That's the story. In Gokarna, so the Shiva Purana just briefly mentions that, Ravana was trying to, this was Ravana's linga, but Ganesha made that happen, place in Gokarna, right? So that is all it mentions, whereas the Gokarna Kshetra Sthala Purana gives a lot of details around the whole story. So it's not like I said, I wasn't trying to be scholarly, because I started going down that path, and I just felt it's not allowing for good storytelling. So I just said, okay, forget about that. I'm just going to list wherever it's there in the source, and let people go and do the hard work, because the story matters more than which part is in which Purana. So that's the tag I took. Okay.
Yeah. So I've kind of got some clarity on some of the things that I wanted to ask you, Deepa. Now I take the mic back to Aditi.
Sure. So I know we could go on for hours ourselves, but we did want to take a few minutes to see if there are any questions from the audience. I would ask that they be truly questions, so just 1 or 2 sentences, and in the form of a question. So if anyone would like to share.
Yes. So my name is Suresh Lodha, and I'm not familiar with the Sthal Puranas. So I wanted to know, what is a Sthal Purana? I thought I understood that there is a Sthal Purana associated with every temple. So if you can elaborate a little bit on what a Sthal Purana is and how you find those stories.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I would consider most of the old temples in the south, they have some kind of a Sthal Purana associated with them. So for example, it would say that this particular thing happened in this particular story. So an example I can give you is Sri Shailam Mallikarjuna. That's a temple in today's Andhra. And it is said that, that is the place where Kartikeya came after fighting with, his brother, because he wanted to get married first. So he comes there, and then there's a Dwadasha Jyotirlinga that manifests there, right? So this is the temple records, that particular temple records have this either in an epigraphy form or in a verbal lore that has come down from generations. They have the story associated with that particular temple. And you will see if it's, most of the temples in the south, in Karnataka, in Odisha, for example, even in some of the temples in Gujarat, Maharashtra, that tradition has come down, that this temple was established for this reason. This is where this particular thing happened. And the inscription of the epigraphy is there. And the puja paddhati will be associated with that, right? So that is what we mean by Sthala Purana. Now, granted, like I said earlier, there's many temples in the south and east, Odisha and Maharashtra seem to have, many of them, the older temples seem to have Sthala Puranas. We don't see many of that in the central area. And we also have them in like Himachal, for example. When we go to Himachal, many of the stories have associations with Shiva, Parvati. We have, this is where the Shiva Parvati Vivah happened. This is where there was a Shakti Pita. So those are all the Sthala Puranas of that particular temple. In the mainland, of course, because of the invasions, I'm assuming that many of these temples were destroyed. Of course, we still thankfully have, Varanasi and Kashi Mathura, but many of them may have been destroyed. But this is the concept of Sthala Puranas. So in fact, using Sthala Puranas were how, our courts went to for the Ram Janmabhoomi case. Even for the Shabarimala, they were using the Sthala Purana of Shabarimala to, I forget what it's called, like some Shasta Upakyana or something like that. They use that Sthala Purana to prove that this is the tradition in the temple. So it goes back centuries and or millennia in many cases. So that is the concept of Sthala Puranas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Maybe before concluding, Deepa, I'll ask you, do you have something in mind for your next writing project? I know you mentioned you have some books up that were already in process, but any thoughts on your next book?
The next book is a couple of things are happening. One is kind of a humorous take on Vedanta's students' life, and I'm using the five senses, how the five senses draws us out from our true nature, kind of one story for each of them. So that is kind of a concept that's it's going to be partly funny, partly self-introspective, and hopefully inspiring. So that is one I have going on. And the second one, my parents live in Chennai. Right across the road is a small Varahi temple. And that every time I go, I feel like Varahi is telling me to write about Lalita Tripura Sundari, because Varahi is a big part of Lalita Tripura Sundari's army. So every time I cross, I feel like she's telling me, hey, when are you going to write this? So the Lalita Pakyana, hopefully, so I have bought the books, Brahmanda Purana, I have them ready. So hopefully that will, because that's also something which, like I said, is very regionally, some people know. Many people chant Lalita Sahasranama, but they kind of don't know the story behind it. And again, in that, there are a lot of Adhyatma, things to be covered. It's probably going to be a little more intense than the Shiva Katha, because there's a lot of like Sri Vidya and, the Upasana Paddhati, but we'll see what form that takes. So those are two things which I hope to complete in the near future.
Wonderful. I strongly encourage everyone, again, really recommend the book. Please buy it. It's available on Amazon India. Please write it, post reviews on Amazon, on social media, tweet and retweet recordings of this session and others. The one thing we can all do is promote authors like Deepa, who are really representing Dharma, doing seva for Dharma, and it's very easy to just do our little bit to promote them. So I really encourage everyone to do that. And thank you to Yamuna and Shruti and Rajiv Varman and others for organizing this. And thank you so much, Deepa, for sharing about your book and for writing the book.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Thank you, Aditi Yamuna, and thank you everybody for joining in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yamini, you're on mute.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It was so special talking about this with you. I was feeling a little, it's the first time talking about the book is a little, overwhelming, but I know you guys will make it very easy.
No, you did great. And this was such a great conversation. Like I said,